expired. We'll move to question time. Senator McGrath.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Senator McAllister. Minister, in dollar terms, how much has the average electricity bill gone up since Labor was elected in May 2022?
Thank you, Senator McGrath. Senator McAllister.
Well, thank you very much, President, and thank you, Senator McGrath, for the question. I think Australians understand how very difficult things have been in recent times in terms of their cost of living. There have been a range of factors globally which have put enormous pressure into energy markets. And when Labor came to government, we were faced with a very difficult situation indeed. It happens that the previous government knew about the pressures in the energy system, and indeed what did they do? Did they take action to fix it? No, they didn't. Their decision was, in fact, to hide it, to actually make a regulation to defer the publication of the energy prices so that the public—
Resume your seat, Senator McGrath.
Relevance, President. My question was very tightly written in terms of how much the average electricity bill has gone up since May 2022. The Minister, sadly, is nowhere near that question.
Thank you, Senator McGrath. I will remind the Minister of your question. Minister McAllister. Too many maps. Order. Minister McAllister.
Thanks, President. Well, energy prices are a serious issue, and they're a serious issue for households and they're a serious issue for businesses, President. And the Albanese government's Reliable Renewables plan means that wholesale energy prices are now lower than when the coalition left office. What is required is a plan to help ease cost of living pressures, and we are doing that. In the last budget, we took a decision to provide every household with $300 off their energy bills. Meanwhile, the coalition has no plan at all to bring electricity prices down now or in the future. And their plan for risky renewal—
Please resume your seat. Senator McGrath.
President, I'm reluctant to do this, but the Minister is nowhere near the question, and I would ask you to perhaps ask the Minister to come back to the question, please.
I have directed the Minister to your question, Senator McGrath, and I believe the Minister has gone to your question. Minister McAllister.
The Senator asks about pricing, and of course what I can inform the Senator is that in the June quarter of 2022, the wholesale electricity price was $264 a megawatt hour. In the June quarter of 2024, the wholesale electricity price is $133 a megawatt hour.
Order. Order.
Our plan to get reliable renewables into the grid—
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator McGrath, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, in your previous answer, you indicated that wholesale power prices have reduced. When can Australians expect to see a reduction in their energy bills below May 2022 levels?
Thank you, Senator McGrath. Minister McAllister.
Well, what I can inform the Senator is that under Labor, prices will certainly be lower than anything that could be delivered by anyone on that side of the chamber, because we need only look at the record of all of you in government to understand exactly the approach that you took to the energy market. During the period you were in government, 4 gigawatts of dispatchable generation left the grid, only 1 gigawatt came on. Power station after power station announced their closure date, and what steps were taken to replace the capacity that was exiting the grid? Zid. We will remember the Underwriting New Generation initiative, proudly propagated by Minister Taylor. How many gigawatts was delivered by the Underwriting New Generation initiative? Absolutely none. Our government is taking the necessary steps to restore stability to the national electricity market and deliver the reliable renewables that Australians require.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McGrath, second supplementary.
Thank you. Minister, from May 2022 to May 2024, electricity prices rose 21.5% and gas 22.2%. How does this translate to a $275 reduction in power bills that each and every household was promised before Labor was elected over 2.5 years ago? Will Labor take the same promise to the next election?
Before I call the minister, I am going to ask for order across the chamber. Order! 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 Senator Wong, Senator Birmingham. Order! I remind all senators you are to listen in respectful silence. I did caution you about not breaking out after I'd called the minister, and you immediately ignored me. That is disrespectful. Minister McAllister.
Thanks very much, President. Well, as I've indicated, we are taking $300 off the power bills of every household. Your plan is in 2 decades to serve up the most expensive form of generation that there is. This is a serious issue for Australians. It's a serious issue for households and for their businesses. But the approach that you suggest is one which is a guarantee of increased prices and poorer reliability.
Sorry, Senator Brown. Minister McAllister.
On a point of relevance, the question was quite tight in terms of will Labor take the same promise to the next election. The minister is currently commenting on the coalition's policies, and I would ask you to ask the minister to address the question, please.
Senator McGrath, there was a few sentences before that question. You talked about prices between May 22 and 24. You referenced gas and you referenced electricity. I think that the minister is being relevant. Minister, please continue. Order. Order. Minister McAllister.
Thanks, President. Well, the Coalition are, of course, always keen to talk about anything but their record. And there's a reason for that, because their record in government on energy was so bad, so very, very bad, and there was so much work to do when Labor came to government. I can inform the senator that indeed households have been under pressure in terms of their electricity bills. It's a consequence of the war in Ukraine that introduced enormous stability into Australian markets and energy markets worldwide, and we are taking action to support households
Minister.
through
The
this
time
transition.
for answering has expired. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, President. My question this afternoon is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Minister, you report regularly to the Senate on the Albanese Labor government's work to put downward pressure on inflation while supporting Australians with cost of living pressures. There is more work to do, and I'm proud to be part of a government that is working every day to deliver for all Australians. We know that the RBA Governor has spoken directly and recently about the dual responsibilities of government to reduce inflation while providing services. So, to that end, can the minister now please explain to the Senate how the government is delivering on these 2 key objectives?
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Pratt for the question. It's great to get a question from the good senator from WA. The Labor government remains focused on dealing with the challenge of inflation, but against that, we are also delivering important services to the Australian community and, indeed, assisting where we can with cost of living pressures. We take our job very seriously about how we got our budget back into shape, how we've got wages moving again, how we could deliver tax cuts in a better and fairer way that ensured everybody who pays tax got a tax cut. And of course, and most importantly in terms of the challenge of dealing with inflation, we turned Liberal debt, hundreds of billions of Liberal dollar debt, into Labor surpluses. 2 Labor surpluses. and we know that they find it very hard to deal with that. Our strong economic management, our back-to-back surpluses have been helpful in dealing with the inflation challenge. And this demonstrates those dual responsibilities which the Governor talked about in her press conference following the RBA board meeting about making sure that we are dealing with inflation, but also, importantly, providing services to the Australian people that they expect. So we've got a list of achievements over the last 2 years that we've delivered both in the economy, cost of living, in our housing agenda, in delivering on the promises we took to the last election. And there is more work to do. But we know that fake outrage over there, the only people unhappy that there wasn't an interest rate increase last week was the federal opposition. They were praying for one. Please, can we have one? Because nothing would give us better pleasure. While we are focused on the real issue.
Senator Pratt, first supplementary.
Thank you. Through you, President, I thank the minister. Providing support for Australians requires a government that prioritises strong economic management. The government's recently achieved a second budget surplus, which the RBA Governor has noted contributes in the nation's fight against inflation. So can the minister please outline the approach she and the Treasurer have taken when it comes to economic and budget management?
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. Thanks, Senator Pratt, for the question. And we have been, as members would know, as senators would know, we have been focusing on making sure we're getting the budget in better shape. At the same time, we've halved inflation, we've delivered tax cuts, we've got record job growth. I think in the over 990,000 new jobs created since this government was elected, record levels, 930,000 jobs since the election, more than any government in history. We've got lower gross debt, 9.7% lower. We're paying $80 billion less in interest costs on that Liberal debt, and we've turned that Liberal debt into Labor surpluses. And we've done it at the same time. That's right, Senator Polley, 2 Labor surpluses. We've done it whilst also providing important cost of living relief that those opposite have argued against in this chamber, real policies that make a difference to the lives of Australian people.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Pratt, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. As a member of a government that's focused on delivering cost of living relief, I'm frankly shocked by the refusal of the opposition to support cost of living relief for Australians at every turn. How is cost of living relief helping? And what has the impact of the slash and burn approach that those opposite have taken? What is the consequence of what they are advocating for?
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, those opposite have no economic credibility. We know that. We know that. We know what they hear. They want all the bad economic news they can get their hands on because they want to shift the blame. They don't want to care. They don't care, and they don't focus on cost of living and the things that matter to the Australian people. They want to come in here, have a fight, play that divisive role that their leader champions, whilst we are working every day, every single day, on how can we help households with the cost of living pressures that they're experiencing. How can we get the budget in better shape so it can deal with the pressures that are coming its way? How do we make sure we're not adding to the inflation challenge but putting downward pressure on it? And all of those steps are working, President. All at the same time, we have nothing from those opposite but no, negative, divisive responses.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Askew.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Gallagher. Minister, Australia is facing a dangerous shortage of saline IV fluids, which is forcing doctors to ration supplies in every hospital across the country. Despite having been worried about it last year, your government did nothing. This is a national crisis of your government's own making, but in question time yesterday you again continue to pass the buck to the states and territories. Will the government finally take responsibility and show some leadership by using the national medical stockpile to secure our supply of saline fluids?
Good question. Thank you, Senator Askew. Minister Gallagher.
AMA thing you sent me? It's not on my thing.
Order.
Thank you. Well,
Order.
again, here we have it.
We'll never forget that.
Senator Askew.
Just like we won't forget sports rules.
Minister Gallagher, please resume your seat. Senator Watt and Senator McKenzie. If you want to have a chat, do it outside the chamber, not across the chamber. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. And I don't agree with the question that has been put. I agree there's a shortage of IV fluids, but it is being managed appropriately. I don't agree with the negative slant that those opposite, that all they know is how to be negative, how to divide, how to raise fear, how to raise concern, how to raise the temperature. That's all you know. That's all you know. And I was just reading a statement from the AMA, actually, who's had to respond because of the level of concern that has been raised in the media, that people think that they are not going to be able to access IV fluids. That is not the case. I listen to the AMA before I listen to the opposition when it comes to health matters, that's for sure. And what they have said is that the coordinated response, well, they are the doctors, Senator Cash, the AMA. That's the peak doctor's body.
Stands for medical.
That advise that.
Minister, please resume your seat. Order. Order. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. And they acknowledged the coordination efforts on the IV fluid shortages to ensure that patients don't miss out. Because some of the stirring and some of the raising of fear that you have been doing has raised concerns in the community, as it always does in the health area.
Ruston.
The AMA have made a statement to reassure the Australian people that the fluid shortages are being handled appropriately, that governments are working together to make sure that no patient is impacted, and at the same time that all efforts are being used to make sure that if there are ways to alleviate the shortage, that it can be done so. And this was discussed at Health Ministers on Friday. The matter is in hand. There's processes established across the health system to deal with shortages, and that is being followed.
Thank you. Senator Ruston, I do not intend to spend question time drawing you personally to order. Senator Askew, first supplementary.
Minister, this crisis has now exposed major supply shortages in other critical areas such as oral liquid morphine, as reported in The Australian today. What action has the government taken to address this reported shortage of morphine, which is causing distress amongst patients?
Thank you, Senator Askew. Minister Gallagher.
Again, the words crisis being used on this is not right. There is a shortage of IV fluids that is being managed appropriately so that patients don't miss out. And so using language like that creates concern that the AMA is now trying to deal with. They want people to be reassured that the IV fluid shortage is being handled. In relation to morphine, the similar process is being handled. This is what health systems deal with all the time. It would have dealt with it when you were in government. The Medicine Shortage Action Group, well, from time to time there are shortages and they get dealt with properly by health professionals who understand the health system, not by people sitting in here and using the word crisis. It is irresponsible, it damages confidence and it worries people. It's been managed properly across all governments.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Askew, second supplementary.
Minister, it has also been reported that patients are waiting on average nearly 600 days to access medicines that have been approved by the TGA through the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme. Will the Albanese government apologise to the Australian public for failing to safeguard their access to essential medicines?
Thank you, Senator Askew. Minister Gallagher.
I really disagree with that question. It's just wrong. We are adding medicines to the PBS all the time. Every budget, the most significant investments going in to listing new medications. There is a process where it comes from the approval committee to be listed. We have a fund that we use to fund those arrangements. There is pressure on it, as there is in every area of government, because there are new medications coming all the time that people would like listed, and they need to go through the process that was in operation when you were in government. It is being managed properly, and not only are we listing new medicines, we've made medicines cheaper. And remember who voted against that? 60-day prescriptions. They said, oh, the sky would fall in. Well, people are saving a lot of money. We've put the freeze that we've put on scripts in this budget, and we've lowered the price of scripts overall. We're doing everything we can to support people with medicine.
Senator Hanson-Young.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Environment and Water Minister, Senator McAllister. Firstly, it's my first question to the new minister. Congratulations. I look forward to asking many more questions. Last night's Four Corners revealed the true cost of environmental mismanagement in the Northern Territory, with the NT government choosing to ignore the science, experts and Territorian community in favour of vested interests and corporate greed. The cotton and fracking industries are being handed huge over-allocations of precious water at great cost to the Territory's most crucial rivers, including the Daly, the Katherine and the Roper rivers. There are serious allegations of conflict of interest, of water theft and illegal land clearing. When will the government take federal action and call for establish a federal inquiry?
Thank you, Senator Hanson-Young. Minister McAllister.
Well, thanks very much, Senator Hanson-Young, for the question. And I think the most important thing to understand here is that the federal government will continue to exercise its powers under the EPBC Act as they relate to land management activities and water activities. And I suppose the observation I would make is that the Northern Territory government has primary responsibility for land management activities, including land clearing. So approval under national environmental law is only required for actions that will or are likely to have a significant impact on matters of national environmental significance. You'll understand that we are seeking to reform the EPBC Act. That is a reform process that has been underway for some time. And there are laws before the Senate at the moment that include the establishment of a National Environment Protection Agency that would have strong new powers and strong new penalties. And we are hopeful that senators in this place will provide support for that legislation because we think it is past time that we started to act on the reforms that were proposed by Minister Samuel and have been so widely consulted with stakeholders. Environment Protection Australia will be a tough cop on the beat, and it will have strong powers and penalties, and they'll be able to crack down on illegal land clearing. It will also be able to issue stop work orders to prevent serious environmental damage and proactively audit businesses to ensure that they're doing the right thing. So my appeal to senators, including two Green senators, is to back these laws. They are before the Senate. We could debate them. We could get moving on them because it is a big process of reform. It's a process that business thinks is overdue, that the environment movement seeks to have come about, and we are looking for partners to pursue that.
Senator Hanson-Young, first supplementary.
Thank you. These serious allegations of water theft, of illegal land clearing, of conflicts of interest are right now. When will your government take some action on this? Your minister has been aware of it for months. Will you inquire into these damning allegations?
Thank you, Senator Hanson-Young. Minister McAllister.
Thanks very much, President, and thank you, Senator, for the question. Water in this continent is precious and it is limited. And you will know, Senator Hanson-Young, that around the country it's something that animates significant discussion within communities, including within First Nations communities. But the truth is that states and territories are responsible for managing water in their jurisdictions. The arrangements in the Murray-Darling Basin are an exception to that and were put in place after significant negotiations and discussions between the Commonwealth and the states and the territories. However, it is the case that national coordination and leadership matters. Back in 2004, the government of the day established the National Water Initiative. That initiative is now 20 years old. That plan, the National Water Initiative, needs to be updated. We need to think about issues like climate change. We need to properly recognise
Thank you, Minister. The time
role
for
of First
answering
Nations
has
people.
expired. Senator Hanson-Young, second supplementary.
Thank you. One of the powers the minister does have are powers that this chamber granted the minister with the water trigger. In relation to Tamboran and Empire Energy's fracking wells, when will this minister use her powers, call in these projects and pull the trigger?
Thank you, Senator Hanson-Young. Minister McAllister.
Thanks, President. Senator, you will know and you will have heard the minister say on many occasions that her obligation under the EPBC Act is to assess information that is before her when certain thresholds are triggered. She's also indicated, as have plenty of environment ministers before her, that speculating about the way that she will use her powers is not a helpful thing to do. The minister.
Order.
The minister has repeatedly made it clear that all projects must comply with national environmental law. All projects need to comply with the expanded water trigger that was introduced by this government, and in the case of the company that you reference, they have been reminded of this on multiple occasions. And it is the case that any breach of national environmental law will be treated extremely seriously.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Marielle Smith.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. On the 7th of August 1974, the Whitlam Labor government passed laws to establish universal health care in Australia. 50 years on, can the minister please tell the Senate how the Albanese government is continuing Labor's proud tradition of fair and affordable health care for all Australians, and in particular, how is the government helping Australians access cheaper medicines and more bulk billing as Australians deal with cost of living challenges?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President, and thank you to Senator Smith, who, like all Labor people, understands that making healthcare affordable is central to cost of living relief, and of course making healthcare affordable is in Labor's DNA. It's in Labor's DNA. So we are delivering cost of living relief for Australians who are doing it tough, in tax cuts, getting wages moving, a $300 energy bill relief for every household, and we are working to ensure that all Australians have access to affordable quality health care, reducing the price of PBS medicines, adding hundreds of medicines to that list, introducing 60-day prescriptions to help save patients time and money. But of course we know on the other side what their attitude is, and that is demonstrated by Mr Dutton's record and by their record. When they were voted out of office, bulk billing was falling off a cliff, and the rot began when Mr Dutton was Health Minister. He tried to do away with bulk billing by introducing a fee on every single visit to the GP, and then he started a 6-year freeze on Medicare rebates. A 6-year freeze on Medicare rebates. Well, our government, the Albanese government, has made the largest investment in bulk billing in Medicare in 40 years. In 40 years. Tripling the bulk billing incentive from the 1st of November. I can see the interjections. They really hate Medicare, don't they? They really hate a government that invests in Medicare. They really hate the fact that we have millions more Australians seeing a doctor bulk bill, 3 million free visits more to the doctor, increase in your state of South Australia by 4.6%. I mean, this is because we care about bulk billing and we care about Medicare, unlike those opposite.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Smith, first supplementary.
Can the minister
resume your seat? Senator Canavan, I called you a number of times. I expect you to listen in silence. Senator Smith.
Can the minister please outline to the Senate some of the recent announcements from the health portfolio that will make a practical difference to the lives of people in my home state of South Australia and right around Australia?
Senators, you may have noticed I'm waiting for silence before I call the minister. Minister Wong.
Well, the Albanese Labor government, supported by all of the caucus, is working to ease the cost of living pressures, including by adding more medicines to the PBS and making medicines cheaper. The most recent budget froze the price of PBS medicines, and it will stay that way until the end of 2025 for general patients, and for concession patients, that price freeze is locked in until the end of 2029. And this is on top of our 60-day prescriptions, as I said, that are saving Australians time and money. And don't we remember, colleagues, how many times they voted against cheaper medicines? Was it 6 times? 6 times. So when they come in here and talk about health, when they come in here and pretend to care so much about public health, let's all remember that 6 times they voted to ensure Australians had more expensive prescriptions. More expensive prescriptions. You're very quiet now, aren't you? Because this is your record and this is what you really stand for.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Smith, second supplementary.
Minister, after a decade of waste, mismanagement, cuts and neglect under the Liberals and Nationals, how is the Albanese Labor government strengthening Medicare?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Well, the fact is those opposite left Australia's healthcare system in a mess. In just two budgets, the Albanese Labor government has delivered a bigger increase to Medicare than those opposite managed in 9. In 9 budgets. In 2 budgets, we have invested more in Medicare than you did in 9 budgets. And, of course, we all know why that is. You only have to look at Mr Dutton's record to know how risky he really is. Do you know what he actually said? He said there are too many free Medicare services. Too many free Medicare services. He tried to abolish bulk billing altogether and he cut $50 billion from Australia's hospitals. No wonder he was voted the worst health minister in the history of Medicare. By who? By Australia's doctors, the ones you want us to listen to, Senator Cash. They voted him the worst health minister in Australian history.
Senator David Pocock.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Assistant Treasurer, Minister Gallagher. Minister, ASIC today released a new report examining the scam prevention, detection and responses of 15 banks outside of the Big Four. The results were alarming. ASIC found those 15 banks detected and stopped just 19% of scam transactions by value. More than 20,000 of their customers footed the bill for 96% of the money scammers stole last financial year. Only 1/3 of these banks had organisation-wide scam strategies. Many did not have an organisation-wide policy for reimbursement. Given that the ACCC has found Australians lost $2.74 billion to scams last year alone, why are we yet to see legislation introduced to crack down on this behaviour and compel a better response from the banks?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. And I must say I haven't seen the report from ASIC today, but I know that the Assistant Treasurer, this has been a real priority for him, both before he had the job in opposition, because we could see what scams were doing across the community, and particularly where they affected a lot of elderly Australians. I think the number of forums that the Assistant Treasurer has going around the country, you'll see in the audience, they're always packed, and it's always an older crowd who are hungry for information about how to manage scams. So I'm not sure I'm in a position that I can give you information specifically about in response to the ASIC report, but I can say that we have been increasing our investment in addressing scams, including in the recent budget, where we put in over $60 million to combat scams and online fraud through the introduction of new codes, which do spell out the responsibility of the private sector. The industry codes, of course, start with banks, telcos and digital platforms, and will require them to have measures in place to prevent, detect, disrupt, stop and report scams. This will be complemented by regulatory enforcement action and penalties for non-compliance. The codes also provide a pathway for consumers to be compensated if a bank, telco or digital platform has done the wrong thing. The Scams Code framework has been consulted on across the Minister Rowland and Minister Jones's portfolio and will bring legislation to the parliament this year. I'll just provide a bit of extra information in the time left. The money that we put in this year's budget builds on the $86.5 million we put in last year's budget to invest in scam prevention across ASIC, ACCC and the ACMA.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Pocock, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. Minister, I note that the government put out a consultation paper in November and then did consultation in January. That's more than 6 months ago now. We haven't seen an exposure draft. We haven't seen any consultation on the detail of any potential legislation. Just reports that it's been delayed. I'm glad to hear it's this year, but what I'm hearing is that the banks are winning in this and putting pressure on Minister Jones to delay it. Is that true?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. No, that isn't true, and I don't think there's anyone in this parliament who has done more to prevent scams and to raise awareness about scams and to educate people about scams, consumers about scams, than Minister Jones. I mean, in all seriousness, he has done more than every other member of this place put together. The community is... It is not, Senator Henderson. God, honestly, you're always looking to find some nasty angle. It does nothing. It's the way you approach everything. You wake up and you think, what nasty interjection can I place on that? The issue is scams. As I said earlier, Minister Rowland and Minister Jones work together on this. Minister Jones has been leading on scams as Assistant Treasurer, as you would expect, but he works in partnership with everybody, and there will be legislation because this government takes scams and scam prevention seriously.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Pocock, second supplementary.
Thanks, President. Thank you, Minister. And again, it's great to hear that it will be by the end of the year. Given that it's been 6 months of radio silence, will you commit to consulting openly on any proposed legislation without the use of NDAs, as we've seen has become a habit of the Albanese Labor government?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Gallagher.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to address that point because I notice there has been some commentary on that, and the government consults widely and openly and transparently on a number of issues. NDAs are used from time to time where there is commercial consequences from other information being available, and that is usually the commercial consequences of other businesses who want to engage with government, and I think that's reasonable in those circumstances. But on the scam front, I would imagine there will be further consultation. Obviously, the legislation coming in allows for further consultation, including with members of parliament. And I would just say in closing, the work that Minister Jones and Mr Rowland have put in to addressing scams are already showing to have benefits. They're estimated that in 2023 scams cost Australians $2.7 billion, which was down from $3.2 billion in 2022.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Van.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. My question goes to the definition and application of comparative advantage within the Future Made in Australia bill. Could the Minister elaborate on how comparative advantage will be interpreted in the context of this legislation and outline the criteria and metrics that will be used to measure and assess it across priority sectors?
Thank you, Senator Van. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Van for the interest in the Future Made in Australia legislation. It is important in legislation, and I'm hopeful that when it comes to the Senate, we'll be able to convince senators to vote for it. I understand those opposite are not going to support it, but we can add that to the long list of issues that the opposition don't support. The legislation.
Order.
The legislation will be guided by principles. I don't have the legislation in front of me, but it will set out the guidelines. It will build on the advice that the Treasurer has developed, that is on the Treasury website, and look at opportunities where we do have comparative advantage. And I think there's been a long discussion about trying to be good at everything, and whether that's really an approach we should take, or whether we actually assess things. Assess support and areas for government investment and private sector investment to be based on the advantages available to Australia. So in particular, Australian industries where we have a comparative advantage. It's not about backing every opportunity, but making sure we are using our strengths and the natural resources we have to make sure that we are maximising on those opportunities. And that's why it is focused on production tax credits in green hydrogen, critical minerals, and some of those other areas that you've seen for in investment that's being led by the Climate Change Minister. Also an innovation fund so that we can look at how we can support innovation, and that's a big area of interest, I know, for the private sector, and also mapping and understanding all of the reach of our natural resources, which was also funded in this budget.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Van, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Can the minister clarify how the government intends to prioritise Australian IP, manufacturing capability and workforce skills against the challenges of lower labour costs and enormous economies of scale of our foreign competitors?
Thank you, Senator Van. Minister Gallagher.
Yes, well, Senator Van's, I think, in that question summed up a number of the issues that the government is currently considering, how you link up skills, industry policy, investment policy to make sure that we are maximising the opportunity for Australia. There's obviously the national interest approach, the national security assessment, all of those things that we are looking at to make sure that we are where government is going to lean in. There is, principles that underpin that, and it's clear not only to all of us in here, but it's clear to the investor community as well. So this is a challenge. I accept that, Senator Van, but it's an important one that we think. The Act itself will provide the transparency and information about how we will make decisions, and then further assessments being done that sit underneath that legislation. But yes, it is an issue, and we recognise that.
Has expired. Senator Van, second supplementary.
Thank you. Should Australia need to depend on foreign-controlled IP, skills or manufacturing capabilities in the sectors identified under the bill, how will the government ensure that our national interests and economic sovereignty are not compromised?
Thank you, Senator Van. Minister Gallagher.
Well, obviously, our national interest is at the front and forefront of every decision that we take. So I don't think there's certainly, and I think every government would take that approach. So all of the decisions that are made under the Future Made in Australia will first and foremost have our national interest taken into consideration. But this really is about, I think, supporting the private sector, leaning in where we can, and particularly at times in early stages where other support might not be available, to give the private sector a crack at what they're saying they can do. And this comes with some risk to government. We acknowledge that, but we are absolutely focused on attracting investment, attracting it into Australia. The renewable energy superpower work that Minister Bowen is leading, the resources, strengthening and adding value to our resources that Minister King's doing, innovation and industry that Minister Cusick is doing.
Expired. Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is for the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Minister Gallagher.
Order.
We currently have more than 265 cases of mpox or monkeypox since the start of the year. Scientists are also worried about avian flu coming from birds in Antarctica and spreading to wildlife and potentially to humans. We were caught short by the last government's response to COVID-19, even though experts had warned that a pandemic was a case of when, not if. Out of the 19 recommendations from the Senate Select Committee on COVID-19, how many recommendations has your government put in full?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Gallagher.
Yes. Thank you, President. I thank Senator Lambie for the question. We did provide a response to that Select Committee some months ago, so that would be, and I can't tell you the number specifically, Senator Lambie, I just can't recall it, but you raise an important question around MPOX, and the National Incident Centre has been activated to monitor that situation and coordinate the Australian government response. Australia has not recorded any cases of the new strain of Mpox virus circulating in Africa, but obviously the systems that are in place, and we have learnt from the pandemic, I think about our emergency health response, have been activated and it is being actively monitored. But that National Incident Centre will allow a scalable and consistent approach to governance and coordinating operations across government and departments. I should say the advice is that the current risk to the Australian public from Mpox transmission is low to moderate. The public health risk to Australians will continue to be monitored and inform any adjustments to current activities. There are 2 vaccines available for use in Australia, and both are currently held by the National Medical Stockpile in case of a surge in cases within Australia, and the department is reviewing the vaccine stock in light of the African outbreak.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Lambie, first supplementary.
Thank you. Out of the 19 recommendations so far, your government's had the ability to put in 3 in full. In the final report of the Select Committee on COVID-19, which was handed down in April 2022, after more than 2 years, the government has not released its response to the report. Minister, do you understand that the next pandemic might be just around the corner and will not wait for you to implement the recommendations before it starts infecting people? When is your government actually going to get around to releasing a response?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Gallagher.
Sorry, I understood that we had responded to the Select Committee report, but I will check. That. There is another piece of work underway that is reviewing the pandemic response, and I believe that must be finalised shortly. But I would also say that the systems and processes put in place and learnings that were experienced under the pandemic have helped shape the response now. So things like the Mpox, and the work that's being done on the CDC has been informed by the pandemic response, and indeed the National Incident Centre, which is being operated now in light of the Mpox outbreak in Africa. So I would say that the learnings are already being implemented, but I will check and see whether there's anything further I can provide about the Select Committee report, if that's what I heard, if that's the report you're after. Yep.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Lambie, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. The first key recommendation from the COVID-19 committee was setting up a Centre for Disease Control. In 2023, your government allocated $91.1 million to be spent over 10 years. Spent over 2 years. Sorry. Can the minister tell me how much money has been spent so far?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. I'm not in a position to specifically answer how much money has been spent so far, but that is work that the Health Minister has been progressing in discussions with the state and territory counterparts, and I'll see if there's anything further I can provide on that. Sorry, I might just have some extra information to provide on that. Oh, that's right. Okay, so the independent panel that will report soon is looking at this, and it's expected that findings from the inquiry will inform the final design and scope of the CDC. So that work is underway and is being led, and hopefully we will have that report soon.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Polley.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, Senator Watt. I note recent concerning reports of corruption, criminality, violence and bikies in Australia's construction union. After these allegations came to light, the Albanese Labor government promised swift action to stamp out criminality and thuggery in the construction industry. What action has the Albanese Labor government taken to keep John Sector and organised crime out of the CFMEU? And congratulations on your new ministry.
Senator Watt.
Thank you, Senator Polly. Well, as we've seen this week, the Albanese government is taking swift, meaningful action to clean up the construction industry so workers have strong representation and safe workplaces, free of corruption, criminality and violence. And last night, the Senate passed Labor's bill to begin a process to put the construction division of the CFMEU into administration. I think all Australians, including construction workers, have been very disturbed by the allegations we've seen of late of organised crime and bikies infiltrating the construction division of the CFMEU and the wider construction industry. The passage of this legislation means that the days of organised crime and bikie influence in the CFMEU construction division and the wider industry are coming to an end. This is a very positive step forward for construction workers and Australians generally. Over the last few weeks, we've seen unions and employer groups calling on the Coalition and the Greens to support the legislation so we can begin working on cleaning up the CFMEU. But last night, the Greens decided it was more important to keep John Sector happy and voted against our legislation. Let's be very clear. What we saw in the chamber last night was the Greens voting to keep John Sector and bikies in control of the CFMEU. The Greens voted to allow violence across construction sites go on, putting workers at risk. And look at them burying their heads now because they know they are ashamed. And they're ashamed because the Greens voted last night to allow bullying, thuggery, corruption and violence to continue in the construction union. You should be ashamed of yourselves. It is brave unions and their members who stood up and stressed the need for intervention that the Greens let down last night. It is all the staff, members and leaders of the rest of the union movement who run decent unions that serve their members' interests that the Greens party let down by pursuing their own narrow political interests. You should be ashamed.
Minister Watt. Order. 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 Senator Shoebridge and Senator McKim, I have called order a number of times. Order. Order. Senator Wong. Order. Senator Wong. Senator Shoebridge. Order. Senator Shoebridge, I remind you of Standing Order 203. I have called your name repeatedly and you kept yelling out and disrespecting my order. Senator Watt, I do remind you to make your comments to the chair. Senator Polly, first supplementary.
President, I believe they should be ashamed, but quite frankly they're not. For weeks, both employer groups and unions have been stressing the importance of taking urgent and strong action to put the CFMEU into administration.
Senator Polly, order. Order. Senator Wong.
President, I can't hear Senator Polly, and nor can Senator Duniam. And I understand that you're very, very sensitive about this, but
Senator Wong.
He's still doing it,
Please
President.
resume your seat. Order. I have called order a number of times. I have reminded Senator Shoebridge in particular about Standing Order 203, and I would expect all senators to listen in respectful silence. Senator Polly, if you would start the question again and please reset the clock.
For weeks, both employer groups and unions have been stressing the importance of taking action, and strong action in fact, in an urgent manner to put the CFMEU into administration. Minister, what risks were created by the Australian Greens political party protecting John's sector and blocking the Albanese Labor government's important legislation? And I repeat, they should be ashamed of themselves, but I fear they're not.
Thank you, Senator Polley. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Polley. I fear you might be right, because last night the Greens had a choice to clean up corruption and violence, but they chose to protect John Setka and his mates. Last night the Greens political party decided to side with John Setka, bikies, corruption, thuggery, bullying and lawlessness, rather than vote with Labor to get organised crime out of the union. Last week, the administrator was ready and waiting to get started. And last week, union groups and employer groups were calling on the Coalition and the Greens to support the legislation so we could begin the work on cleaning up the CFMEU. And every day, the Greens dragged our action out so they could get a run on the news, and what that meant was another day of uncertainty for workers and employers in the construction industry, another day of protecting John Setka and his allies, another day of the CFMEU hiding and moving assets, another day of bullying, thuggery, corruption and violence in the construction union. Working in construction is hard and dangerous, and the workers in that industry deserve a strong, effective and clean union.
Has expired. Senator Polley, second supplementary.
I know that over the past fortnight we've seen the Australian Greens political party repeatedly block action against corruption in the construction division of the CFMEU. Last night we saw the Australian Greens vote against this important legislation here in the Senate. Minister, what is the impact of the delay tactics of the Greens political party on the delivery of the Albanese Labor government's reforms? And why are they so important?
Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Polley. Well, as we've all seen, the last few days the Greens party have been running around Parliament, meeting with the CFMEU, boasting about the donations and support they will get by voting against our strong laws. Well, it's no surprise, though, that the Greens have strongly supported the thugs in the construction union, because the truth is the Greens have been courting the CFMEU for years. In fact, in a sweaty 35-minute rambling video on YouTube entitled "The 18-Year Plan for a Greens Government," the member for Griffith, Max Chandler-Mather, said, "If we're going to win government, quote, we need to develop strong relationships with the construction union." And this has already started happening. So last night's dirty work from the Greens is another investment from them in their strong relationship with the CFMEU. And I invite Senator Shoebridge to tell us which is his favourite Greenfield. Is it Darren or is it Michael Greenfield? Because we know your relationship is strong. We know that's why you voted to protect John Setka and the people facing criminal charges in the CFMEU rather than protecting the members of their interests of their members.
Resume your seat. Senator McKim.
It's a point of order on reflection on another senator, a personal reflection on another senator, and also, for that matter, a personal reflection of a member of the other place, President. So we've had two now in the last 15 seconds, and I ask that you require Senator Watt to withdraw and apologise.
Thank you, Senator McKim. Order. Order. Senator Wong.
President, if the point of order relates to the discussion of Mr Senator Shoebridge's relationship with the two men facing charges, he's very welcome to make a personal explanation at the conclusion of question time.
Order. Senator Watt. Senator Watt. I'm responding to the point of order raised by Senator McKim. I did think your response went to motive, and I would ask you to withdraw. I've asked you to withdraw.
I withdraw.
Thank you. Senator McDonald.
My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Minister, we've seen the price of iron ore drop to US $81.80 a tonne, the lowest since November 2022. This is set to have massive impacts on Australia's finances, with your government making massive spending commitments well into the future. With every $10 drop in iron ore prices equally $10 billion in lost national income and a potential $3 billion in lost company tax over the next 3 years, will you curtail unnecessary spending to protect the budget or order the approval of new mines to boost the bottom line?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator McDonald for the question. As I have said publicly and as the Treasurer has said, we've taken a conservative estimate in terms of the iron ore price and how it feeds into the budget, and we do that for good reasons. And we are seeing a decline in the iron ore price at the moment. It's tracking, I think, slightly ahead of what the Treasury forecasts are. But the work we've done on the budget is broader than just the iron ore price. The fact that our budget, that we've turned Liberal debts into Labor surpluses, has been because we have gone through and found what we considered wasteful spending and returned that to budget. It has been because of the resilience of the labour market, the fact that more people are working and working more hours has been good for the budget as well, and of course good for those individuals. The fact that people are earning more is also good for the budget. And so that's been part of our, we wanted wages to move again, they're moving again. So not everything is determined by the iron ore price. Obviously, it's a significant contributor to the budget, and we're able to deliver a lot of services because of revenue to the budget. But we will manage the budget in a responsible and methodical way, as we have been, finding savings where we can, prioritising services and cost of living programs where we can, where it doesn't add to inflation, providing tax cuts to every taxpayer in Australia. They have been able to be found within the space in the budget, and we will continue to do so. And we have, as I just said in my previous answer, turned hundreds of billions of dollars of Liberal debt into Labor surpluses, to Labor surpluses. Gross debt will peak 9.7% lower than expected when you were in government, and we are paying $80 billion less on our interest bill because of the steps we've taken to address the budget pressures.
Senator McDonald, first supplementary.
Minister, your Environment Minister has ignored Indigenous Australians in Orange to block a $1 billion gold mine that had cleared all of its approvals and was set to generate almost 1,000 jobs and millions in company taxes and royalty payments. What is the lost economic opportunity for Orange, for the local Indigenous population, and the impact on the federal budget to that decision?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, I don't accept the question. The question is inaccurate, and indeed the Minister for Environment has responded to this today in the media. I think consultation with local traditional owners is an important part of the Environment Minister's decision. We are richer as a country because of the thousands, tens of thousands of years of First Nations culture, and it is right, and the laws of this country actually set out the process for consideration of those matters. No one wanted to see a repeat of the Juukan Gorge. No one in this chamber wanted to. It was a very similar decision to the one the Deputy Opposition Leader in the other place made, some 50 kilometres from the decision, and I hope that the company involved will consider another place for the tailings dam.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McDonald, second supplementary.
Minister, considering the looming budget black hole thanks to massive new Labor spending, plummeting iron ore prices under your watch, and your government's continued vetoes on new mining projects, how will you recoup the lost revenue, royalties and taxes from mining? Where will the money come from?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister Gallagher.
Money come from nuclear power plants all over the country that haven't been costed yet. You've been very quiet about those, haven't you? You launched this big policy and then everyone kind of scurried away from it because you can't explain how you'll do it. On what those opposite call wasteful spending, included in the amount that's used and used publicly in the $315 billion figure is indexation of the aged care pension, is women's safety initiatives, is energy bill relief, is pay for aged care and childcare workers, funding for new medicines on the PBS, cheaper childcare, rent assistance. All of those things is what you over there consider to be wasteful spending. Well, we don't. We think it's necessary spending, investments in our community and in our country. and I think it gives just a little snapshot of what Australia would be like should you ever be in government again.
Thank you, Minister. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I ask that further questions be placed on notice.